suspended and that I be recognized for the purposes of speaking as if in morning business.
Without objection, the senator from Arizona is recognized.
I thank you, Mr. President. I speak today on a day that appears to be positioned between two very consequential decisions. Yesterday, the President announced his plan to draw down U.S. forces in Afghanistan, pledging to pull out 10,000 troops this year and the remaining 23,000 surge forces by September of 2012. Tomorrow, the House of Representatives will likely vote on a measure to limit the use of U.S. funding for U.S. military operations in Libya to only, quote, non-kinetic activities, in other words, non-combat activities, so that no limited strike missions to suppress air defenses or predator strikes against Gaddafi's forces, which we're doing very little of already. The only military actions for which the Commander-in-Chief could commit our armed forces would be supporting missions from search and rescue to aerial refueling to intelligence. That is the provisions in what is very likely to be voted on and passed by the House of Representatives tomorrow. Now, some may not see a connection between these decisions, but the connection is profound. We're having a profound debate in this country right now that I suspect will continue for some time. Critical questions are being asked and discussed. How should we in the United States define our national interests? What is the proper role for America in the world? How do we balance our commitments abroad and the global demands for U.S. leadership with an American public that is justifiably war-weary after a decade of conflict and that is rightly concerned with our unsustainable levels of government spending and national debt? These are vital questions. They will determine the future of our nation and, indeed, the future of the world. Reasonable Americans can disagree over what the right answers are. And though our disagreements may be heated and passionate, we should always remember that we're all Americans, that we're all patriotic, and that we all want to do what is best for the nation we love. The discussions we are now having over Libya and Afghanistan go right to the heart of this broader debate. And this is where we see the real practical impact of the decisions all of us in public life must make and be accountable for. We're all trying to define America's interest and role in the world, to separate that which we can and must do from that which is beyond our capacity and our benefit to try to accomplish. We're all striving for a balanced approach to America's interest abroad. And it is for that reason I'm very concerned about both the President's decision on Afghanistan and the House's pending vote on Libya. I agree with the President that, thanks especially to the sacrifice and courage of our fighting men and women, we're making amazing progress in Afghanistan. This progress is real and it's remarkable. But as our commanders on the ground all point out, it is also fragile and reversible. Our commanders also say that what will be decisive is the fighting season next year, the warmer spring and summer months when the insurgency historically picks up its operations after resting and regrouping a bit during the colder months. This will be our opportunity to consolidate our gains in southern Afghanistan and being transitioning more and more of that fight to our Afghan friends while increasing numbers of U.S. forces shift their main effort to eastern Afghanistan, where the Haqqani networks, al-Qaeda, and other regional militant groups are still present and operating actively. The reason our commanders had to take this sequential approach is because they did not get all the forces they requested in 2009, 40,000 troops, as opposed to the 33,000 the President gave them. What this means in practice is that our commanders in Afghanistan still need next year's fighting season to deal the same crushing blow to al-Qaeda and the Taliban in the east as our forces have dealt them in the south. However, under the President's plan, which calls for having all of our surge units out of Afghanistan by September, those troops will begin flowing out of Afghanistan right at the time that the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and their allies begin stepping up their operations, especially in eastern Afghanistan. This is the irony of it all. The President's decision in December 2009 had the effect of making this war longer and costlier by forcing our commanders to tackle our enemies in southern and eastern Afghanistan sequentially over 2 years rather than simultaneously in one decisive action over 1 year. And now, just at the moment when our troops could finish our main objective and begin ending our combat operations in a responsible way, just when they are 1 year away from turning over a battered and broken enemy in both southern and eastern Afghanistan to our Afghan partners, the President has now decided to deny them the forces that our commanders believe they need to accomplish their objective. I hope I am wrong. I hope the President is right, that this decision will not endanger the hard-won gains that our troops have made or the decisive progress that they still need to make next year. I hope that proves correct, but I'm very concerned that the President's decision poses an unnecessary risk to the progress we have made thus far to our mission and to our men and women in uniform. Our troops are not exhausted. They are excited that after 10 years, we finally have a winning strategy that's turning this war around. And anyone who says that our troops are exhausted should go out and talk to them. They want to stay at this until the job is done. We have sacrificed too much. America has a vital national interest in succeeding in Afghanistan. After all that we've given to this mission, the money we have committed to it, the decade we have devoted to it, and the precious lives we have lost throughout it. Why would we do anything now that puts our mission at greater risk of failure? I would offer the same counsel to my Republican friends in the House with regards to our mission in Libya. I know that my colleagues in Congress are angry with the administration and its Libya policy, and they have every right to be. From the disrespect and disregard the administration has shown Congress, to their bizarre assertion that we're not really engaged in hostilities in Libya, to the lack of resolve with which they have prosecuted this fight and made the public case for it, the administration has done an unfortunate amount to earn the ire of Congress. But we can't forget the main point. In the midst of the most groundbreaking geopolitical event in 2 decades at least, as peaceful protests for democracy were sweeping the Middle East, with Gaddafi's forces ready to strike at the gates of Benghazi, and with Arabs and Muslims in Libya and across the region pleading for the United States military to stop the bloodshed, the United States and our allies took action and prevented the massacre that Gaddafi had promised to commit in a city of 700,000 people. And by doing so, we began creating conditions that are increasing the pressure on Gaddafi to give up power. Yes, the progress towards this goal has been slower than many had hoped, and the administration is doing less to achieve it than I and others would like. But here are the facts. We are succeeding in Libya. Gaddafi is going to fall. It is just a matter of time. So I would ask my colleagues, is this the time for Congress to turn against this policy? Is this the time to ride to the rescue of an anti-American tyrant when the writing is on the wall that he is collapsing? Is this the time for Congress to declare to the world, to Gaddafi and his inner circle, to Gaddafi's opponents who are fighting for their freedom, and to our NATO allies who are carrying a far heavier burden in this conflict than we are? Is this the time for America to tell all of these people that our heart is not in this and that we won't see this mission through, that we will abandon our best friends and allies on a whim? This all comes back as to how we Americans define our national interests and act on them. We can all agree that none of us are averse to doing what is necessary to defend America and our allies when we face a clear threat in the world. In that way, we're like any other nation in history. But what sets us apart from those other nations, what makes us exceptional, what makes us the United States of America, is that we define our interests more broadly than that. Our interests also encompass the fact that we are the leader of the free world, that the circle of nations that want us to play that role is growing, not diminishing, and that this position of leadership also confers responsibilities that are greater than our own immediate and material self-interest. It is the responsibility we have to the universal ideals of freedom and justice and human rights, of which our nation is both the greatest embodiment and the greatest champion in human history. That is not to say that we can or should be involved everywhere. That is not to say that we must act wherever and whenever our ideals are threatened. This is not to say that military action is always the right answer, nor is this a recipe for endless conflict and commitment. America is powerful, but we are not omnipotent. We must make hard choices about where to spend our blood and treasure. There will be more occasions than not when we will choose not to intervene, either because our interests do not warrant it, or because we don't have the capacity to do so, or because greater American involvement will not improve the situation. And when we choose not to intervene forcefully in places where the cause of justice is calling out to us, be it Sudan or the Congo or Syria or countless other places where I and others have argued against intervention, we will be assailed as hypocritical and inconsistent. That is unfair, but it's nothing new for America. What we can never forget is that our nation's interests are forever colored by our values, that America has always believed that the success of freedom and democracy in other lands does not just make our world more just, it makes it a safer, more secure, and better place for Americans and our children. We can never afford to define our interests so narrowly that we would have sat back as an anti-American tyrant slaughtered his own people, thereby destroying one of the most historic attempts by millions of Arabs and Muslims to build better and more stable governments. That would have served neither our moral nor our strategic interests. Similarly, once we are engaged in a fight, as we are now in Libya and Afghanistan, and when we still have a clear path to succeed, as we do in both countries, it is in both our moral and strategic interest to finish the job, even if it is difficult and costly and unpopular. The failure is the only cost that we truly cannot afford. America cannot make the world perfect, but we can make it better, freer, more just, more prosperous. That's what's always made us an exceptional nation. That is what has always been the greatest source of our national security. That is what has always made us America, and that's how we must remain. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the following articles, Wall Street Journal article this morning entitled Libya and Republicans, the Washington Post editorial this morning entitled End of a Surge, and a Wall Street Journal article also entitled Unplugging the Afghan Surge be inserted in the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President.
And I note my friend from South Carolina here today. Senator from South Carolina, as many of us know, is a reserve colonel, a terrible mistake by the promotion boards, but is a reserve colonel in the United States Air Force JAG Corps. He has spent more time in Afghanistan than any member of Congress, including more than most members of Congress combined. He has observed closely in Afghanistan the surge, its success, its impediments, and I wonder if my we ask unanimous consent to engage in colloquy with the senator from South Carolina.
Without objection.
I wonder if my friend saw General Keane, the architect of the surge in Iraq, on one of the networks this morning, describing his views on the President's decision concerning drawing down our troops from Afghanistan.
I did, and if I could respond to my colleague about your statement on the floor, I'd like to associate myself with it. I thought it was a very well-articulated statement about the times in which we live in. Afghanistan, for about 18 months, we've had additional military capacity that was never known to Afghanistan. All because of President Obama's decision to send 33,000 troops at General Petraeus' request. Now, the request was for 40, but at the time I said I do appreciate President Obama giving the commander the resources that could do the job, but you have to do it differently. And General Keane is the architect of counterinsurgency. He's a mentor of General Petraeus, and he and General Petraeus and others came up with a strategy that succeeded in Iraq. Here's what's happened from my point of view. I go about every 3 months. About 2 years ago, I was very afraid we were going to lose. How could the Taliban come back with about 100,000 NATO forces in Afghanistan? The truth of the matter was that the rules of engagement for NATO really were law enforcement rules. The NATO forces could not engage the enemy in an effective way. We were looking at this from the eyes of a law enforcement activity, and the number of American forces was about 30,000. That wasn't enough to help build the Afghan army, train and equip the Afghan army, control the population, provide safety, give governance a chance to flourish through better security. That's why we needed more troops. And to all the commanders before General Petraeus, you were holding Afghanistan together, in many ways with duct tape. I believe Iraq is a pivotal moment in the war on terror, but it is a fair observation to make that because of the war in Iraq, resources were taken away from Afghanistan. The truth of the matter, Senator McCain, even though we've been there almost 10 years, we really have only been there with the capacity to bring about change for the last 18 months. So what's happened in the last 18 months? The 30,000 surge forces were sent to the southern part of Afghanistan. This really is a Pashtun civil war. It is a fight between the Taliban, a radical element of the Pashtun community, and a majority of Pashtuns and other Afghans who want a different way. Kandahar is in the south. It's the spiritual home of Mullah Omar. That's the place he lived, and there is an American operating base within a mile of his compound. You can get up on the roof of a prison there, and you can see Mullah Omar's compound. So the argument is if we win in the south, we can win anywhere. So we took 30,000 troops into the southern part of Afghanistan, and we broke the enemy's back. And we have allowed the Afghan army and security forces to develop. In September 2009, Senator McCain, there were 800 people a month joining the Afghan army, 2,000 a month leaving. I'm not very good at math, but that's not a way to build up an army. From December 2009 till the present, we've been recruiting 6,000 a month in the Army, 3,000 in the police. What happened? Better pay and a sense that we were going to win. So in 17 months, we've built up the Afghan security forces by 90,000. We'll have 305,000 by the end of this year. What's the problem with the President's drawdown of forces? Why can't you do it with the numbers we have? Counterinsurgency is a very labor-intensive operation. Its goal is to provide population security, focus on training by fighting with the unit. Instead of training them during the day and hoping they do well at night, you literally go out and live with the police and the Army. It's a very labor-intensive activity, but it's the best way to provide training and build up capacity. Here's the problem. The surge forces under President Obama's withdrawal plan are now going to compromise next summer. Drawing 10,000 down this year is going to make it hard to finish out the fighting season we're engaged in now. But here's General Allen's dilemma. Because we had 30, not 40, We couldn't go to RC East, where the Haqqani network exists, and fight the Taliban in the south at the same time. So we took our full force of the surge and put it against the Taliban in the south. We broke their back. We've been holding RC East, and the game plan was to take those surge forces out of the south and go to RC East next summer and deliver a decisive blow to the Haqqani network. That way, the two forces undermining Afghanistan would be put at bay. Because of the President's decision and the rejection of General Petraeus' advice, come next summer, the surge forces will be all gone by September, and General Allen is in a box. How does he hang on to the security gains in RC South? Because the enemy's will has been broken. They have been put on their knees, but they're not yet defeated because they can go across the border to Pakistan. So next summer, the surge forces that we were going to have available for General Allen are going to be gone, and RC East cannot be engaged in the same fashion as RC South. What does that all matter? That means that one of the enemies of the Afghan people is getting a reprieve. And the ability to develop security forces all over the country so that when we leave they can fight and win has been compromised. Counterinsurgency requires math. You need a certain amount of soldiers against the enemy. I was asked last night, there are only 50 al-Qaeda. Why do you need so many troops? One Navy SEAL could defeat 50 al-Qaeda. Those who suggest that simplistic formula don't understand what we're trying to do. We're trying to take a country that's been beaten down, involved in civil war for 30 years, and provide better governance through better security. And the way you beat the Taliban is you go and take them on with an overwhelming show of force. You inspire the local population to come your way and get off the sidelines because they don't want the Taliban to win, but they're afraid at the end of the day we're going to leave and the Taliban will take over. Because of this surge, the people in the South jumped our way. And this is what's so heartbreaking. We're on the verge of being able in 2 summers to deliver decisive blows to 2 enemies of us and the Afghan people, the radical element of the Taliban and the Haqqani network in the East. But because of this adjustment in strategy, we now have lost, I think, capability, and General Allen's going to have a much more difficult job. Things to watch, Senator McCain.
According to the Washington Post this morning, editorial, End of the Surge, the mismatch between President Obama's strategy and his troop withdrawal timetable. Mr. Obama's withdrawal decision with no clear basis and strategy increases the risk of failure. The only other issue I would like, and I think the Senator from South Carolina is very well qualified to describe it, I hear over and over again, especially from those who are opposed to our involvement in this conflict, quote, the troops are exhausted. The troops are exhausted. And yet, General Keane this morning on one of the news channels said, they're not exhausted, they're exhilarated because they're winning. They know they've sacrificed so many of their comrades, killed and wounded. They're not exhausted, but they certainly don't want to come home and defeat something that I saw a long time ago.
Yeah, that's a very good question. You know, who are these people and what makes them tick? Why would people who could leave by just, not re-enlisting, why do they keep going back to Iraq and Afghanistan? My view of our force is that they see the face of the enemy, they believe they've got a strategy that's working, and they don't want their kids to go back. So when you use the troops as a reason to shortcut this war, I don't think you're really listening to what they say and what they do. If they were exhausted and hopeless, they would change careers. I have never seen Afghanistan change as much as I have in the last year. And my fear is that the successes we have achieved are going to be compromised for no good reason. Both of us believe that you could, at the end of 2012, you do this right, remove all the surge forces. But what we have been trying to argue to the President and anyone else will listen that this fighting season and the next fighting season are the best chance we'll have in our lifetime to bring about permanent, sustainable change. And General Petraeus, I think, has been trying to tell the country and the President, give General Allen the ability to take the fight to the east like we did to the south. And from the troops' point of view, the reason they go to Afghanistan and Iraq over and over again is that they understand this enemy better than you and I. They see what the enemy is capable of doing. They saw it in Anbar, where children were killed in front of their parents by al-Qaeda. They see what happens when the Taliban hanged a 9-year-old boy because they believe he was providing information to the coalition forces. I think our troops understand the danger America faces to the point that they're willing to leave their families time and time again to protect all of us back here at home. And if you don't believe Afghanistan matters, then I think you're going to be in for a rude awakening. If it goes bad in Afghanistan, if the Taliban can survive and wait us out, and they begin to reemerge, a lot of people who helped us, Senator McCain, are going to get killed. And when America goes off to some future conflict to help the oppressed, we're going to be seen as an unreliable ally, and our enemies are going to be stronger. One final thought. This is a consequential week. The negotiations dealing with our national debt have broke down. My colleagues in the House, who I really respect, are about to vote to cut off funding, which will send a signal to Muammar Gaddafi that I think is unhealthy. At the end of the day, the decisions we make here in Congress are going to affect our nation long after me and you leave this body. Gaddafi is on the ropes. NATO has limited capacity, but if the American Congress tells Gaddafi we're out of the fight, I'm afraid that that's going to give him a sense of hope he doesn't have today. And what does it matter if he stays? I think logically you can expect if he outlasts NATO, the Arab Spring is over. We can't go into Syria, but he will take it out on his people. I think it will affect the price of oil. That will be the end of NATO, because NATO taking on Gaddafi and losing is going to be very hard for that organization to go off to another war and be taken seriously. So, Senator McCain, I hope that we can survive this week, that cooler heads will prevail. And I'm going to tell General Allen, when you come to get confirmed for this job, please let us know if you're having to make hard decisions because of lack of resources. Give the President that information, let Congress know so we can adjust this strategy. I hope the President is right and that we're both wrong. But General King and General Petraeus have come up with a strategy that I think, given time and patience, will work. This new strategy is something that's untested, that is unnecessarily risky. And the way to keep America safe, Ronald Reagan said, was that when people who love freedom, how do you prevent a war? He said, when people who love freedom are strong, not weak, that's the best way to prevent war.
Could I say in summary, and I want to thank the senator from Connecticut for his forbearance. I agree with the senator from South Carolina, obviously. And I say to my friends on the other side of the Capitol that although it may fall on deaf ears at this moment, I hope they know that we understand their frustration about the President's failure to recognize that the War Power Act exists, about the failure of the administration to consult and brief members of Congress on the situation in Libya, about many of the aspects of the way that this conflict has been conducted where America is, quote, leading from behind. But I want to repeat what Senator from South Carolina said. This could mean the end of NATO. If NATO can't defeat a third-rate military power, then NATO is probably going to go out of business. If we don't succeed in Libya and oust Gaddafi, as is the President's policy, you will see a center for terrorist activities. You will see a return of al-Qaeda to Libya, certainly a dramatically increased influence. And frankly, it will send a message to the world that even though we say that a dictator and a brutal killer and murderer like Gaddafi, that it is our policy that he be removed from power, we are either unwilling or unable to do so. And I would caution again my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I hope they wouldn't do anything that would enhance the ability of this brutal dictator to remain in power and continue to perpetrate the murders and crimes that he is so well known for. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, I'm honored to follow that very articulate colloquy between my colleagues from Arizona and South Carolina, and certainly draw inspiration from the consequences abroad that they have outlined in that colloquy, the consequences internationally and at home in this very, very important week. I rise to call attention to developments in an area that are among those consequences: the price of gasoline, the supply of fuel internationally and at home. I rise to commend the President of the United States for releasing today some 30 million barrels of oil over the next 30 days, which already have brought down the price of oil by about $5 per barrel on the New York Mercantile Exchange. This consequence certainly cannot be the end of the campaign that we must continue to wage. And I commend the President for heeding the calls from myself and my colleagues to address the pain felt across Connecticut and the country as prices remain too high at close to $4 a gallon. The drop that we've seen today should be followed by additional reductions, and that can happen only if the administration and this body continue the campaign to achieve those lower prices. This development follows the decision by the Federal Trade Commission to conduct an investigation, again, heeding calls from me and my colleagues, that a searching, penetrating, comprehensive investigation is necessary to forestall and prevent manipulation and speculation on the markets. We've seen over these months that supply and demand are not the cause of increases in the price of oil internationally or here at home. It is directly and substantially the consequence of speculation by the traders and the hedge fund, as well as potentially illegal manipulation. And the FTC investigation is in response to those calls we've made based on what we've seen in those markets. Clearly, the FTC is reacting, for example, to the fact that U.S. refiners' margins have increased more than 90% since the beginning of 2011. And over that same period of time, the amount of capacity has been reduced by 7%. It's 81.7% over this same period of time, a 7% reduction during the same period in 2010. Those indicia of potential forces in the market that have nothing to do with supply and demand are certainly more than sufficient basis for the FTC investigation, combined with the release of product from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. They have helped to bring down prices. But the campaign must continue. We must deter and prevent speculation and illegal manipulation. We must send a message to those speculators and manipulators: you are on the wrong side of these markets. You are on the wrong side of history. You will lose, and you will lose big time. This kind of message is what is necessary to protect Connecticut and national consumers. We've seen in Connecticut that the price is still above $4 on average in many places. And this issue is not just one that affects consumers. It is an economic issue with broad and far-reaching ramifications. It affects small business people who have to drive their cars to get to work, to deliver product, to arrive at places where they are working and spending time. It has ripple effects throughout our economy, and it is crushing to families and small businesses. The rise in prices in this country for fuel and gasoline have been crushing to families and small businesses, and they've had ramifications throughout the economy that these two steps, the release of product from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and the FTC investigation, will help to counter. More is necessary. Stronger enforcement and regulatory steps to stop and prevent abusive speculation and manipulation. And I will be announcing a number of proposals for my part that I hope will be followed in the next days and weeks. These two steps are important, but they must be followed by others. They must be the beginning, not the end, of a comprehensive strategy to bring down the price of fuel, not just gasoline, but soon heating oil, for Connecticut families as well as consumers across the country. This battle must continue. Thank you, Mr. President. I note the absence of a quorum. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Mr. Burr. Ms. Cantwell. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Carper. Mr. Casey. Mr. Coates. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Cochran. Ms. Collins. Mr. Conrad. Mr. Coons. Mr. Corker. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Crapo. Mr. DeMint. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Enzi. Mrs. Feinstein. Mr. Franken. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mrs. Hagan. Mr. Harkin. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Heller. Mr. Hoven, Mrs. Hutchison, Mr. Inhofe, Mr. Inoue, Mr. Isaacson, Mr. Johans, Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, Mr. Kerry, Mr. Kirk, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Cole, Mr. Kyle, Ms. Landrieu, Mr. Lautenberg, Mr. Leahy, Mr. Lee, Mr. Levin, Mr. Lieberman, Mr. Lugar, Mr. Manchin, Mr. McCain, Mrs. McCaskill, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Ms. Mikulski, Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Nelson of Florida, Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, Mr. Paul, Mr. Portman, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Reid of Rhode Island, Mr. Reid of Nevada, Mr. Risch, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Sessions, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Shelby, Ms. Snow, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Toomey, Mr. Udall of Colorado, Mr. Udall of New Mexico, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Warner, Mr. Webb, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Senators voting in the affirmative: Ayotte, Blunt, Coates, Cochran, Cornyn, DeMint, Enzi, Graham, Grassley, Isaacson, Johans, Kirk, Lugar, McCain, Roberts, Rubio, Sessions, Vitter, and Wicker. Mr. Conrad. Mr. Kyle. Mr. Webb. Mr. Webb, no. Mr. Whitehouse. Senators voting in the negative: Bingaman, Blumenthal, Brown of Ohio, Cardin, Carper, Casey, Collins, Conrad, Coons, Inouye, Kyle, Landrieu, Lieberman, Mikulski, Nelson of Nebraska, Nelson of Florida, Sanders, Tester, Warner, Webb, Whitehouse, and Wyden. Mr. Udall of New Mexico, no. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Barrasso, aye. Mr. Brown of Massachusetts, aye. Mr. Corker. Mr. Corker, aye. Mrs. Boxer. Mrs. Boxer, no. Mrs. Feinstein. Mrs. Feinstein, no. Mr. Akaka. Mr. Akaka, no. Mr. Levin. Mr. Levin, no. Ms. Stabenow. Ms. Stabenow, no. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Hoven, aye. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett, no. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Coburn, aye. Mrs. Shaheen. Mrs. Shaheen, no. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, aye. Mr. Franken. Mr. Franken, no. Ms. Snow. Ms. Snow, aye. Ms. Cantwell. Ms. Cantwell, no. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Menendez, no. Mr. Begich. Mr. Begich, no. Mr. Reed. Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, no. Mr. Rockefeller. Mr. Rockefeller, no. Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, aye. Mr. Leahy. Mr. Leahy, no. Ms. Murkowski. Ms. Murkowski, no. Mr. Pryor. Mr. Pryor, no. Mr. Shelby. Mr. Shelby, aye. Mr. Alexander, no. Mr. Merkley. Mr. Merkley, no. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, aye. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, no. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Hatch, aye. Mr. Risch. Mr. Risch, aye. Ms. Klobuchar. Ms. Klobuchar, no. Mrs. Hutchison. Mrs. Hutchison, aye. Mr. Burr. Mr. Burr, aye. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Inhofe, aye. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Crapo, aye.
Did you highlight this or no? We didn't. No, there is a.
Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Chambliss, aye. Mr. Heller. Mr. Heller, aye. Mrs. Hagan. Mrs. Hagan, no. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mrs. Gillibrand, no. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Lautenberg, no. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Baucus, no. Mr. Harkin. Mr. Harkin, no. Mr. Cole. Mr. Cole, no. Mrs. McCaskill. Mrs. McCaskill, no. Mr. Manchin. Mr. Manchin, no. Kerry. Mr. Kerry, no. Mr. Udall. Mr. Udall of Colorado, no. Mr. Toomey. Mr. Toomey, aye. Mr. Portman. Mr. Portman, aye. Mr. Thune. Mr. Thune, aye. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Durbin, no. Mrs. Murray, no. Mr. Reed. Mr. Reed of Nevada, no. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Schumer, no. Mr. Paul.
Yes.
Mr. Paul, aye.
Are there any senators who have not yet voted who wish to change their vote? If not, on this vote, the ayes are 41, the nays are 57. Motion is defeated.
Mr. President.
Senator from Delaware.